Every year, millions of people throw away perfectly good vegetable scraps without realizing they could still have some life left in them. At the same time, millions of gardening videos promise you can grow an endless supply of food from nothing more than leftovers from your kitchen. A lettuce stump becomes a whole new lettuce. A potato peel turns into a basket of potatoes. An onion base magically produces endless onions. It sounds almost too good to be true, and that's because, in many cases, it is. The internet is full of impressive time-lapse videos that make regrowing vegetables look effortless, but very few explain what actually happens after the camera stops recording. Today on Savage, Harvest, and Heal, we're separating gardening fact from gardening fiction. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly which kitchen scraps are genuinely worth saving, which ones waste your time, and why understanding the difference can save you months of disappointment.
The biggest misunderstanding begins with one simple word: regrowing. Most people think regrowing means producing an entirely new vegetable, identical to the one they originally bought. In reality, that's often not what happens. Many vegetables can regenerate leaves or roots for a short period because they still contain stored energy inside their tissues. That doesn't necessarily mean they can produce another full harvest. Think of it like a rechargeable battery. Some batteries hold enough power for repeated use, while others only have enough for one final burst before they're empty. Kitchen scraps work in much the same way. Some contain growing points capable of producing new plants, while others are simply using up their last reserves before eventually dying. This distinction explains why so many beginners become discouraged. They place a lettuce stump into a bowl of water, watch fresh green leaves emerge within a few days, celebrate their success, and then wonder why the plant stops growing a week or two later. The answer isn't that they did something wrong. It's that the lettuce was never designed to live indefinitely from its leftover base. Those first new leaves are fueled mostly by energy already stored inside the stump. Without healthy roots developing in nutrient-rich soil, the plant eventually runs out of resources. What looked like unlimited growth was actually a temporary survival response.
That doesn't mean regrowing vegetables is a myth. Quite the opposite. Many scraps really can become productive plants under the right conditions. The key is understanding which vegetables naturally reproduce from stems, roots, bulbs, or tubers, and which ones don't. Once you understand how each plant grows in nature, suddenly the success stories and the failures make perfect sense. Plants are incredibly diverse in the ways they reproduce. Some rely entirely on seeds, others spread through underground stems, bulbs, crowns, or tubers. Garlic multiplies from individual cloves because each clove contains a complete growing point ready to produce a new bulb. Potatoes grow from tubers filled with stored carbohydrates and dormant buds called eyes. Sweet potatoes produce slips that can become entirely new plants. Meanwhile, plants like carrots, cabbage, and broccoli follow completely different life cycles, making successful regrowth much more limited than many social media videos suggest. Another important truth rarely mentioned online is that supermarkets don't always sell vegetables intended for propagation. Many commercial growers treat produce to extend shelf life or reduce sprouting during storage and transport. Potatoes may be treated with sprout inhibitors. Garlic imported from overseas is sometimes selected specifically because it stores well without sprouting quickly. Even if treatments aren't used, weeks or months spent in cold storage can weaken a vegetable's ability to grow vigorously. So when someone fails to regrow a supermarket onion or potato, it doesn't necessarily mean the method is wrong. It may simply mean the starting material has already lost much of its growing potential. One of the biggest advantages of regrowing scraps isn't actually saving money. In truth, packets of vegetable seeds are often inexpensive compared with the effort required to nurse scraps back to health. The real value lies elsewhere. Regrowing scraps teaches you how plants develop. It allows children and adults alike to observe roots forming, shoots emerging, and dormant buds awakening. It reduces kitchen waste,
encourages gardening habits, and provides an easy way for beginners to gain confidence before investing in larger vegetable gardens. If your goal is education, sustainability, or simple enjoyment, regrowing scraps can be incredibly rewarding. If your goal is feeding an entire family year-round, you'll meet realistic expectations.
Throughout this video, we're going to examine the most popular vegetables people try to regrow from kitchen scraps. Some genuinely deserve the hype, others produce little more than decorative leaves, and a few are so misunderstood that gardeners waste months caring for plants that were never going to deliver a meaningful harvest. The difference between success and disappointment often comes down to knowing what the plant is biologically capable of doing. So, before you drop another vegetable stump into a glass of water because someone online promised endless free food, stay with us. Some of what you're about to learn may completely change how you look at kitchen scraps, and it could save you a lot of wasted time, effort, and false hope.
The first vegetable almost everyone tries to regrow is lettuce, and it's also one of the most misunderstood. Social media makes it look magical. Place the cut base into a shallow dish of water, wait a few days, and suddenly fresh green leaves appear from the center. The comments fill with excitement. Free lettuce forever. But here's what usually isn't shown. Fast forward another 2 or 3 weeks, and that impressive growth begins slowing dramatically. The leaves become smaller. The outer base starts turning brown. Eventually, the plant stalls completely. Why? Because what you're seeing isn't a brand new lettuce plant, it's the last burst of life from the original one. Imagine asking someone to run a marathon without giving them any food or water along the way. They might manage the first few kilometers using stored energy, but eventually their body runs out of fuel. Lettuce behaves in a remarkably similar way. The stump contains enough stored carbohydrates and nutrients to push out a few fresh leaves as a survival mechanism. It's the plant's attempt to stay alive after being cut, but unless it develops a healthy root system in nutrient-rich soil and receives enough sunlight, it cannot continue replacing the energy it's spending. The result is exactly what many gardeners experience: an exciting beginning followed by disappointing silence.
Now compare that with spring onions, also known as green onions or scallions. These are in a completely different league. Unlike lettuce, spring onions naturally regrow from their bulb and root plate. Leave about 2 inches of the white base attached, place the roots in a small amount of water, and within days you'll usually see fresh green shoots racing upward. Even better, once roots strengthen, transplant them into soil, and they'll often continue producing new leaves again and again. You're not creating an endless supply of onions, but you are encouraging a plant that is biologically designed to keep producing fresh foliage. That's why spring onions have earned their reputation as one of the easiest and most reliable kitchen scraps to regrow. Celery tells a story somewhere in between. Cut off the bottom of a celery bunch and place the base in shallow water. After several days, tiny yellow-green leaves begin emerging from the center. It's an exciting sight, and unlike lettuce, celery has a better chance of becoming a productive plant if it's moved into good quality soil at the right time. But here's where patience becomes critical. Many people expect supermarket-sized celery stalks within weeks. That's simply not how celery grows. It requires consistent moisture, fertile soil, cool temperatures, and several months of steady development. Even then, the new plant may never match the size or quality of the original because commercial celery has been grown under ideal farming conditions with carefully managed nutrition.
Then there are carrots, perhaps one of the biggest internet myths. If you ever placed a carrot top into water and watched feathery green leaves emerge, congratulations, you've successfully grown carrot foliage, but not another carrot. This surprises many beginners because the videos often stop before explaining what happens next. The orange carrot we eat is actually the plant's storage root. Once it's been harvested and cut, that remaining crown cannot regenerate itself into another full-sized carrot. Instead, the remaining crown uses leftover energy to produce leaves, and if allowed to mature over a much longer period, flowers and seeds.
It's fascinating to watch, especially if you're interested in collecting seeds. But if your dream was harvesting another large orange root, you're likely to be disappointed. And then we come to potatoes, the vegetable that convinces many people that regrowing scraps really can work. In this case, the excitement is justified, but only if you understand one crucial detail. Not every potato peel will grow into a thriving plant. The secret lies in the eyes. Those tiny dimples on the potato's surface are dormant buds, each capable of producing stems, leaves, and eventually an entirely new potato plant. A peel without an eye is little more than compost waiting to happen, but a healthy piece containing 1 or 2 strong eyes, planted correctly in loose, fertile soil, has the potential to produce multiple new potatoes underground. Suddenly, the internet isn't exaggerating. It just forgot to explain the science that makes it possible.
This is exactly why blindly copying viral gardening hacks can be so frustrating. 2 vegetables may look similar in a glass of water during the first week, yet their futures couldn't be more different. One is merely surviving on borrowed time. The other is beginning an entirely new life cycle. Knowing that difference transforms you from someone who follows gardening trends into someone who truly understands how plants work. And as you'll soon discover, some of the most surprising kitchen scraps aren't the obvious ones everyone talks about. They're the overlooked leftovers that most people throw straight into the bin without a second thought.
Now, let's talk about onions, because this is where expectations often collide with reality. Cut the bottom off an onion, leave the root plate intact, and plant it in moist soil. Given enough warmth and sunlight, fresh green shoots will often emerge. At first glance, it looks like you've cracked the code to unlimited onions. But here's the truth. That original onion isn't magically rebuilding itself. Instead, it's using the remaining energy stored inside the bulb to produce new growth. In some cases, the bulb will split and form multiple smaller onions rather than one large replacement. Gardeners who understand this aren't disappointed. They know they're working with the plant's natural life cycle instead of expecting a perfect clone of the supermarket onion they started with. Garlic, however, is a completely different success story. Every garlic clove is essentially a ready-made plant waiting for the right conditions. Leave a healthy garlic clove in your kitchen long enough, and you'll often notice a green shoot emerging from the tip. That's not a sign the garlic has gone bad, it's a sign it's ready to grow. Plant that clove with the pointed end facing upward in loose, well-drained soil, and over the coming months, it can develop into an entirely new garlic bulb. The catch is patience. Garlic isn't a quick crop. Depending on the variety and climate, you're looking at several months before harvest. But unlike many kitchen scraps, this is genuine propagation. One clove really can become a whole new bulb under the right conditions.
Perhaps the most surprising success belongs to sweet potatoes. Unlike ordinary potatoes, sweet potatoes don't grow from eyes in quite the same way. Instead, they produce vigorous shoots known as slips. Place a healthy sweet potato in water or moist growing media, and before long, you'll notice leafy stems emerging from various points. Those slips can be gently removed once they're several inches long and rooted in water before being planted into the garden. Each individual slip has the potential to become a separate plant, capable of producing multiple sweet potatoes beneath the soil. It's one of nature's most impressive examples of vegetative reproduction, and it's the reason experienced gardeners often grow dozens of plants from a single sweet potato. Then there are herbs, and this is where many people unknowingly throw away some of the easiest plants to multiply. Basil, mint, rosemary, and oregano aren't usually grown from scraps in the same sense as vegetables, but healthy stem cuttings can root remarkably well. Trim a fresh stem just below a leaf node, remove the lower leaves, and place it into clean water. Within days or weeks, depending on the herb, tiny white roots begin appearing. Once those roots are well established, the cutting can be transplanted into soil, where it often grows into a full-sized plant genetically identical to its parent. It's one of the simplest and most reliable ways to expand a herb garden without buying new plants.
But for every genuine success story, there's another gardening myth that refuses to disappear. One of the biggest is the belief that every vegetable scrap belongs in water. In reality, water is only the beginning for certain plants. Leave scraps sitting in water for too long and you create the perfect conditions for rot, mold, and bacterial growth. The smell alone is enough to send many beginners running. Plants need oxygen just as much as they need moisture. Roots submerged continuously without proper care can begin suffocating, while soft tissues quickly break down. That's why successful gardeners know exactly when to move a plant from water into soil. Water is often a temporary nursery, not a permanent home. Light is another factor that viral videos frequently overlook. A windowsill may seem bright to us, but to a plant it can feel surprisingly dim. Newly regrown scraps often become long, thin, and pale because they're desperately stretching towards stronger light. This condition, known as becoming leggy, weakens the plant and reduces its chances of thriving after transplanting. Once roots begin forming, the goal should be gradual exposure to stronger sunlight or bright outdoor conditions, allowing the plant to build sturdy stems and healthy green leaves capable of producing the energy it needs through photosynthesis.
Here's something else that catches many beginners off guard. Even when a kitchen scrap survives, it doesn't always produce food that's worth harvesting. A regrown lettuce may only give a handful of small leaves. A celery base may produce thin stalks rather than thick, crunchy ones. An onion may divide into several tiny bulbs instead of one large one. That doesn't mean the experiment failed. It simply means the internet often measures success by whether something grows, while gardeners measure success by whether it produces a worthwhile harvest. Those are two very different goals, and understanding that distinction is what separates realistic expectations from viral fantasy. So, does regrowing kitchen scraps actually save money? The honest answer may surprise you. If your only goal is producing as much food as possible, buying quality seeds or healthy seedlings is often faster, more productive, and ultimately more efficient. But if your goal is reducing waste, learning how plants grow, introducing children to gardening, or simply enjoying the satisfaction of bringing something back to life, then regrowing scraps is incredibly valuable. The harvest isn't always measured in kilograms of vegetables. Sometimes it's measured in knowledge, confidence, and a much deeper appreciation for the remarkable resilience of plants.
And there's one final truth that experienced gardeners understand better than anyone else. Successful gardening isn't about chasing shortcuts. It's about working with nature instead of fighting against it. The gardeners who consistently harvest baskets of fresh vegetables aren't relying on internet tricks alone. They're building healthy soil, choosing the right varieties, watering wisely, feeding their plants when needed, and understanding each crop's natural life cycle. Kitchen scraps can absolutely become part of that journey, but they should never replace the fundamental principles that every thriving garden is built upon. Now, if there's one mistake that ruins more regrowing attempts than any other, it's believing that once a scrap starts growing, the hard part is over. In reality, that's when the real gardening begins. Those first tiny leaves are exciting, but they are also incredibly vulnerable. A single day without enough light, overly wet soil, poor drainage, or extreme heat can stop that young plant before it ever has a chance to establish itself. Many beginners blame themselves, thinking they lack a green thumb, when the truth is they simply underestimated how delicate that transition period really is.
Healthy roots are the foundation of every successful plant. You can have the greenest leaves in the world, but if the roots aren't strong, the plant is living on borrowed time. That's why experienced gardeners don't obsess over what they can see above the soil. They pay close attention to what they can't see beneath it. Loose, well-draining soil allows roots to spread freely in search of water and nutrients. Heavy, compacted soil does exactly the opposite. It traps water, limits oxygen, and suffocates new roots before they've had a chance to develop. If you're serious about giving your regrown vegetables the best chance of success, improving your soil is often far more important than choosing the perfect kitchen scrap. Another overlooked factor is nutrition. Think about what happened before that vegetable ended up in your kitchen. It spent weeks or even months growing in carefully managed farmland where it received balanced nutrients throughout its life. Once you cut it and place the leftover piece into water or soil, you're asking it to begin growing again, but now with very limited resources. As new growth appears, the plant quickly begins using whatever nutrients remain inside its tissues. Unless those nutrients are replaced, growth slows, leaves lose their rich green color, and development eventually stalls. This is why feeding regrown plants with compost, well-rotted manure, or a balanced organic fertilizer can make such a dramatic difference after they've established healthy roots.
Temperature is another silent factor that determines success or failure. Every vegetable has a preferred growing range. Lettuce and celery thrive in cooler conditions, while sweet potatoes demand warmth to flourish. Garlic prefers cool weather during much of its growing cycle, whereas basil struggles the moment temperatures become too low. Trying to regrow a cool season vegetable during the peak of summer or a heat-loving crop during cold weather is like asking a polar bear to live in the desert. It isn't impossible in every case, but you're making the plant fight against conditions it was never designed to handle. Then there's the issue of disease. One reason commercial growers rotate crops and carefully manage their fields is to reduce the spread of pests and soil-borne diseases. Kitchen scraps aren't immune to these problems. A potato carrying fungal disease can pass that disease into your garden. An onion base that's already beginning to rot won't suddenly become healthy because it's planted in soil. This is why you should always choose fresh, firm, healthy scraps for regrowing. If it's soft, moldy, slimy, or has an unpleasant smell, it's usually better suited for the compost pile than the garden.
Perhaps the biggest lesson hidden inside all of this has nothing to do with vegetables at all. It's about patience. Modern life has conditioned us to expect instant results. We watch 30-second videos where weeks of growth are compressed into a few satisfying moments. But gardens don't operate on social media timelines. They grow according to nature's schedule. Some plants take days to sprout. Others take months before rewarding you with a harvest. The gardeners who succeed year after year aren't necessarily the smartest or the luckiest. They're the ones willing to wait, observe, learn from mistakes, and keep going even when the first attempt doesn't work. So the next time you're preparing dinner and you're about to throw those vegetable scraps into the bin, pause for just a moment. Ask yourself whether you're holding a piece of waste or the beginning of another growing season. Sometimes it's nothing more than compost waiting to happen, but sometimes, hidden inside that ordinary kitchen scrap is the potential for new life, a valuable lesson, and the satisfaction that comes from understanding nature just a little better.
If this video helped separate gardening myths from reality, let us know in the comments. Which kitchen scrap have you successfully regrown, and which one completely failed? Your experience could help another gardener avoid frustration or discover a new favorite project. And if you enjoy practical, research-backed gardening advice without the internet hype, subscribe to Savage Harvest and Heal. Give this video a thumbs up and turn on notifications. We'll continue uncovering what really works in the garden so you can grow smarter, waste less, and harvest more, season after season.